We invite you to turn in your Bibles to the Song of Solomon, chapter number 6. We looked at chapter 6, verses 1 through 3 this past Wednesday night, and we saw the difference in verse 3 of chapter 6 from the verse that is almost identical in chapter 2 and verse 16. In 2:16, she says, "My beloved is mine, and I am his. He feedeth among the lilies." In chapter 6 and verse 3, she says, "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies." Identical verses, but just reversed order. What has happened? She begins to say, "My beloved is mine," kind of a religious testimony. But yet, in chapter 5, she falls asleep and loses the sense presence of her love. She is then compelled to deal with the daughters of Jerusalem in chapter 5 and verse number 8, and says, "I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem," that is, the nominal church members, "if you find my beloved, that ye tell him that I am sick of love." They see such an ardent desire in her to find her beloved. They wonder, why is she so spiritually upset and so aggressive in seeking for the one that they've just gotten used to by being brought up in church. They've been daughters of Jerusalem all their life. They ask two questions, chapter 5 and verse 9. "What is thy beloved more than another beloved, O thou fairest among women? What is thy beloved more than another beloved, that thou dost so charge us?" She begins to tell them what her beloved is in verse 5 through verse number 16, and she ends, in chapter 5, verses 10 through 16, if I didn't say that. She ends it in verse 16 by saying, "He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem." That's not the end of it. The daughters of Jerusalem then are prompted to ask another question. Not "what is thy beloved," but now in chapter 6 and verse 1, "Whither is thy beloved gone?" They are getting in the vein of the things, of the spirit of things that she was in when she asked him in chapter 1 and verse 7, "Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon." So she's looking for him at the beginning of her relationship with him. And now the daughters of Jerusalem, who have been long comfortable with God, who have a convenient God, who have an undisturbed religion, who don't have to give their life or dwell on a cross because they've got a God of their imagination. She stirs them up. They ask, first of all, "Well, what is your Jesus more than our Jesus? What is your beloved more than our beloved?" And then she tells them. And then they ask, "Well, where can we find him? Whither is thy beloved gone, O thou fairest among women? Whither is thy beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with thee?" Same word she used. Will you turn aside? So then she begins to tell them. And in chapter 6 and verse 2, her confidence and the awareness of his presence comes back to her. She tells him where he is. Can you tell me where God is today, friend? If you give me a theological answer and say he's in heaven or he feels all things, I'm going to label you as a daughter of Jerusalem. But if you say my heart is a holy habitation of God, Ephesians 2, verses 19 through 22, then I know you are one of the fairest among women. She has come by her testimony to them, asking two questions. What is he and where is he? Back to a confidence of his presence. "My beloved is gone down into his garden." Chapter 4 and verse 12, what is the garden of the beloved? She is. A garden enclosed is my sister. You are the planting of the Lord. Blessed is the man that stands, sits, and so forth. He shall be like a tree They shall be trees of righteousness. We are laborers together with God. Ye are God's husbandry, the apostle said. He talks about a certain sower went forth to sow and sowed wheat. That's you. He's in his garden. He's in his church. She realizes that as she gives his testimony through her own experiential confidence. He's gone down to his beds of spices. How many greens are out there in the foliage? I don't know. The oak and the pine, the maple and all the rest, they're all green, but they're all different. The grass is green. Different kinds of grass have different kinds of hues. I don't know. How many characters are there in the church? I don't know. God doesn't stamp them out with a cookie cutter. There are diversities of spirit, but one Lord. There are differences of administration, but one Spirit. And we see that nobody is made alike. We imagine the snowflakes. I say imagined. I've never had anybody prove this to me, but they say no two snowflakes are alike. I accepted that because they told me that, but I can't prove it. Every time I take two snowflakes to compare them, they melt. You are uniquely prepared by the Lord. The hand can't say to the eye, because you're not the hand, you're not of the Lord. There's differences of character, but there's all one faith. There is the church at Antioch, there's the church at Corinth, there's the church at Ephesus, there's Thyatira and Pergamos and all the rest of them. But they're all different. Say to the angel, to the minister of the church, this. It was a unique message to that unique church. So the beds of spices are nothing but the various gifts of character in each individual Christian. That's where he is. He's in his garden. Specifically, where is he? He's in the beds of spices. What is the spice of life? I'm going home if you don't tell me. Variety is the spice of life, right? There's never such variety as you've ever seen among the believers in Christ Jesus. Paul said there's one body, but there's many members. So she begins to understand that all are not alike. And even in her sense of desertion, the one thing that she has always had is a desire to find him. The one thing she's always had is a faith that evidences things not seen. She never quits looking for him. He has gone into his garden, into his bed, into the beds of spices. She's a different spice, a different character than the rest. And she says, to feed in his, and this time it's not gone down into his garden singular, but since she mentions beds, plural, of spices, plural, she says to feed in his gardens, plural. There is a little group up in North Carolina meeting today in an old school building. There's about 6 of them. It's an entirely different church, a different spirit than this one is. There are other churches throughout the world we don't know about that God has got his people there. And they're all according to the precepts of God. So he has gone down into his garden, singular, but to the beds, plural, of spices, plural, to feed in the gardens, all kinds of churches, to gather lilies. The Lord said, y'all are all, amazed at Solomon and his glory. But let me show you something that's more glorious to me than Solomon. Look at this lily. So a lily is somebody that accepts who they are. They can't move. That's the times before appointed in the bounds of their habitation. They can't go to Walmart. They can't get the seamstress to sew fancy garments like Solomon could. They just stand there and glorify God like they are. Consider the lilies. Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. You know why? Because God does not look on the outward appearance, but God looks upon the heart. Jesus is gathering lilies this morning. Shall you be gathered? Are you content? Godliness with contentment is great gain. This, without faith it is impossible to please God. Do you have that pleasing element that draws the attention of our beloved to you today? Is God looking for you to gather you up? Is he bypassing all of that which churchanity and religiosity is making such a big deal about it? Are you taken up with the fire and the earthquake and the storms and the shakings and all of that? Or can you stand still and hear the voice of silent stillness, the still small voice of God? What went you out to see, Jesus said to the crowds about John? What went you out to see? May I ask you this morning, why are you here? What have you come to see? I sure hope it's more than what you can see with your natural eye. I sure hope you have a desire within your heart to bring Christ near to your soul. Because I want to tell you something. After she sees all of this, she reverses the order. She doesn't say, my beloved is mine and then I am his. Now, since she's been through all of that and be brought back to her assurance, as in our brother Jonas's very spiritually applied and put together devotion this morning, after she's been through all those crosses, she says first, again, I am my beloved's. And then, my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies. And now he comes to speak for the first time since chapter 5 and verse 2. The last thing we heard him say was Revelation 3:20. I stand at the door and knock. Standing at the door of the church and saying, if there's any man left in there with any desire for the Spirit, I'll come in and fellowship with you. He says in chapter 5 and verse 2, open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled. He gives her 4 names to entice her to open up to him. For my head is filled with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. How angry would it make a man for his wife to lock him out? It's my house. I pay the bills. What do you mean locking me out? She wouldn't never hear the last of it. Every time one of her friends come around, he'd be there to tell the story again. You know what? She locked me out the other day. The last thing we hear of him is, open to me, my sister, my spouse, my undefiled, my beloved. And now, the first thing out of his mouth in chapter 6 and verse 4, thou art beautiful, O my love. Isn't that amazing? Oh, my soul. This is the voice of love. In chapter 3 and verse 4, the voice of love says, it was but a little that I passed from them, but I found him whom my soul loveth. Read me the next 2 phrases, chapter 3 and verse 4, but I found him whom my soul loveth. Read me down to the second comma. That's the voice of love. Oh my goodness. Chapter 4 and verse 9, the voice of love. This is the Lord Jesus talking to you, church. Thou hast ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with one chain of thy neck. What is the eye representing? It is representing faith. Through faith we understand. By faith we see. He that believeth on him, and he that seeth the Son and believeth on him hath life. Your faith ravishes the heart of God. Have you ever wondered why it says David is a man after God's own heart when there was other men that didn't commit murder like he did? Have you ever wondered why it says David is a man after God's own heart when there were other men who didn't commit adultery like he did? Have you ever wondered why God said David is a man after mine own heart? Because he never committed idolatry. Never. There was a lot of fleas on that dog. But dear soul, listen. He loved the Lord. And no matter what mess he got into, he never exchanged the true God of Israel for Balaam or any of the rest of them. And he never went a-whoring after other gods. Thou hast ravished me, my sister, with one of thine eyes. Dear soul, as our brother has well told you, and I sit here listening to that fresh heart and that fresh voice, facing life with truth, proud of him and feeling sorry for him at the same time. Proud of him that he knows all of this, but feeling sorry for him that if the Lord ever lets him get to the place in life that, as far as age is concerned, that I have, he's going to know all that he said by experience, and he's going to have all those heartaches. But dear soul, through all those heartaches, through many dangers, toils, and snares, there'll be one thing that'll keep you. This is the victory that overcometh the world. Do you know what it is? Even our faith. 1 John 5:4. The thing about the Shulamite is that she never quits looking for Solomon. This is the only army that can conquer God. This is the only army that God can't defeat. What are you talking about? Keep reading. Song 6:4. Thou art beautiful, O my love, as Tirzah, comely as Jerusalem, terrible as an army with banners. Turn away thine eyes from me, for they have. This is the only army that overcomes God, is a faithful love and trust in him through the many dangers, toils, and snares. There's never, ever a thought of I quit, I tried him, he didn't treat me right, I leave Jesus, I'll have nothing else to do with him. There's never, ever, ever a shred of that. That's why she burst forth in Psalm 6 and verse 3, I am my beloved's. It's like an awakening. It's like she's proclaiming it to herself as well as to everybody else. I am my beloved's. All of this didn't separate me from him. What shall separate me from the love of God? Neither life nor death or powers or principalities. And Paul couldn't think of anything else. He said, or any other creature. Right. He just put it all in one ball of wax. Nor any other creature shall be able to separate me from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus. I am my beloveds. What kind of mess you in outwardly? We ain't got time for everybody to tell their story, have we? Everybody's got a pity party. But tell me what's going on inwardly. I am my beloved's, and he is mine. How do you know he is yours? 1 John 4:19. 1 John chapter 4 and verse number 19. She loves God. I am my beloved's. And then she says, and I know he's mine. How do you know that? Anybody tell me? Why do you love God? You know what's unbelievable is that we'll say, oh, I wished I knew I was a Christian. Oh, I wished I had more confidence in the Lord. I wish this and I wish that. And I want to say, listen, are you telling me you love God? Oh, yes. Well, don't that prove that God loves you? Why do you think you're hungering and thirsting after righteousness if Jesus ain't the water and the bread? How come you have a hunger for that which God is if you're not of the Lord? Why do you love him? Because he first loved me. I am my beloved's. Why? Because he first loved me. So therefore, my beloved is mine. Look at verse 10, 1 John 4:10. Herein is love. You read me the not. Read me the negative phrase.
Not that we love God.
Did you get that? Yeah. I just want to stand and give my testimony and tell everybody I love the Lord this morning. I hope so. That's good if you do. But that ain't love. Herein is love. Not, negative, that we love God, but that he loved us and sent. For God so loved the world, he gave. Gave who? His only begotten Son. He's saying it all over again. Herein is love, not that we love God. I am my beloved. How come you can say that? Because he loved me in order for me to love him. If you think you're in a love relationship with Jesus by yourself, you don't know nothing. That ain't good English. Yeah, but it's good preaching. Why do you have a hunger for God if you didn't smell the fresh bread cooking? How come you're thirsty for the Lord if your soul don't pant after him like a hart the deer does for the water brook? Dear soul, if you love God, it's because he first loved you. So don't be whining to me and telling me, I don't have any insurance. What you want is insurance. Come on now. This is the victory that overcometh the world, even our feelings. What'd you say? Faith. So, through all of this, through many dangers, toils, and snares, she has already come. She's hurting. She's got that old empty, hard, gnawing stomach feeling that she can't eat, she can't sleep. Nothing will do her. She's not comfortable in her bed. She's out in the streets. She's searching for anybody that can help her. She is smelling the lock of the door to smell his scent, anything she can do to gain some kind of heart comfort. And finally, after those who are not near as spiritual as she is, ask her two questions. She is ready to give answers to them concerning the hope that lies within her. And what do you know? The hope began to bubble up and she began to recognize it. And she says, guess what? I am my beloved. And I held him fast and I would not let him go. And my beloved is mine. Now he's gathering his lilies. And just call me Lily. Hey, Lily. Anybody Lily here this morning? That's who God gathers. He said, you're as terrible as an army with banners. This army with banners is an army under authority. It's an army that's disciplined. It's an army that conquers. Weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but spiritual, to the pulling down of strongholds. These weapons even overcome God. Turn away thine eyes, for they have overcome me. Genesis 32, verse 26. Let me give you an instance when God was overcome. Genesis 32. Jacob was left alone and wrestled a man till the breaking of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against old Jacob, he touched the hollow of his thigh and put it out of joint. And he, Genesis 32, 26, and he, God, said to Jacob, read me 3 words.
Let me go.
Jacob overcame God with his love and his determination and his desire. Here's one army God can't conquer. Here's one army that conquers God. If there is any sick among you, let him call for the elders of the church. Let them pray. The prayer of faith shall save the sick. If you ask anything in my name, it shall be given you. Let me go. God begging man to let him go. Dear soul, do you have the tenacity of the bulldog to hold on to God once you've got him? They train those dogs to pull down those wild boar by their ear and hold on to them no matter what till the owner gets there to them, till the master gets there, and they'll hold them. What about you? You holding on? Or did you say, well, I tried and it didn't work? Not really. Listen, this is going to be worse English than you ever can imagine. It ain't never been that it didn't work. It always works. God is overcome by the faith of the lily. Let me go. That's amazing. Look at Exodus chapter 32. Exodus 32. And if my dry fingers will let me turn my page, I'll tell you what verse. Exodus 32. Verse 7, and the Lord said unto Moses, go get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and have said, these be thy gods, O Israel, which have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. So I'm going to kill them. What's the next thing? You didn't say that. Read me the first phrase in verse 10.
Now therefore let me alone.
Did Jacob let him go? Not till he blessed him. That's one army God can't conquer. The army of the church's faith. Did God do what he wanted to these people at that particular moment? No. Why? Because Moses wouldn't let him alone. Isn't that amazing? Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. And Moses said, you know, Lord, I don't think that's a good idea. The Egyptians going to hear about that and think you ain't able to bring this people on in. And God didn't do what God wanted, what we think God wanted to do. God did what Moses wanted him to do. And you quit praying about it? Did you really? You ain't praying for it no more? You ain't trusting God no more? Well, it's been too long. Everything's stacked up against it. Well, what do you think God does? Make it easy for you? He wants that faith to be glorified and honored. God promised you something, and then he'll turn the whole world against it, so you'll think there ain't no way you're going to get it. Abraham's going to give you a kid. 14 years later. One of them 90 and the other's 100. And you quit praying for it. God tells you that your lily-like faith will overcome him, and you don't use that. That's a check that you don't cash at heaven's bank. You quit praying for that lost grandchild or that circumstance or situation in your family, in your heart, in your circumstances. You quit on God, and you got God telling you he can't handle that. You ravish him with one of your eyes of faith, much less two. You're terrible as an army with banners, thou hast overcome me. Isn't that amazing? Galatians chapter 5 and verse 6. Give me a description of God. God is love. Now Galatians chapter 5 and verse 6. Why is faith so powerful? I'm going to start reading this verse and you finish it out. Galatians 5:6. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision.
Faith which worketh by love.
Really? Yeah. You read it, do you believe it? Your faith worketh by love, and God is love, so you're in the vein of the character and the person of God. Isn't that amazing? And you quit praying, and you quit believing, and you just tipping your hat with God, and you don't love the Lord anymore with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Anything in the world can hinder you from giving honor to God. Your puppy dog sneeze, and I can't go to church. Oh, this and that and the other happened, and I quit on God. Really? You got that power and you don't exercise it? Listen. First, let's read Hebrews 10 and verse 34. Church, you don't know who you are. Brother Hubert said if the church ever finds out who she is, you ain't going to be able to hold her. Hebrews 10:34, for ye had compassion of me in my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourselves that ye have in heaven a better and an enduring substance. Cast not away, therefore, your confidence, which hath great compensation of reward. Have you quit on God? Have you tried God and found out he was difficult and decided you didn't want to do that no more? You're just going to go through the motions and you're just going to slide through? A lot of people in hell like that. A lot of good Baptists, a lot of good preachers in hell right now, just going through the motions for whatever reasons. But what about you? Are you a lily? Did God come to gather you this morning? Did God send you over here to hear this message to jack you up a little bit and make you understand and know you can't face God with yesterday's religious ashes when he is a consuming fire? My soul. Where's that flame that was flaming up in you at one time? Is that all it took? Just a little bit of aggravation from the devil and make you quit? All God's got to do is just blow on you a little bit and it'll flame up again. It was cold as idiot yesterday and my fire kept going down, and I'd open up the front of that old wood stove and there'd be some hot coals, and I'd gather them all together in the middle, and I'd get me a piece of that old fat wood and stick it in there, and the more I blew, the hotter and redder those coals got, and whoosh, all of a sudden that rosin inside of that pine just busted into flame, and then I started putting bigger wood on it. What about you? God blowing on you today? Why don't you come back to God? You say, well, I've been here all the time. No, you really hadn't. You brought an old carcass in here and sit it down, but there wasn't no lily. How about you get back into your lily character? Have you overcome God recently? Can you burst forth through all these dangers, toils, and snares that she's been through? And dear soul, I want to tell you something. Last thing he said was, open to me, my beloved, my dove. And you would expect him to say, I've been out here all this time. Why'd you shut me out? Because God is love. And the next words out of his mouth are, thou art beautiful, O my love. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. People trying to find out about heaven, trying to read the book of the Revelation. That's about the church. You'll never find out about heaven there. You need to read 1 Corinthians 13. That's how you'll find out about heaven. Because heaven is where God is, and this is the expression of God. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4, charity or love suffereth long, and read me the next three words.
And is kind.
Some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life, they may have not been able to pay their light bill. They may not have had fancy clothes. Some of them did. Some of them were richer than I could have ever imagined. But the thing that I found that I admired most in human beings was kindness. It's like God. Open to me, my dove, my beloved. I'm out here in the dark. And I'm the light of the world, and you got me out in the dark. Let me in. Next word she hears, thou art beautiful, O my beloved. Love is kind. Elijah took off running when Jezebel got after him. He went so far, the servant said, I can't go no farther. He said, he left you right there. I'm still going. Winds up in a cave. And God comes to him, and he didn't say, now listen, you're my prophet and you've made me look terrible. You know what he said? What doest thou here, Elijah? Isn't that nice? Isn't that kind? There's so many times that I deserve to be blessed out by God, but God has been kind to this poor sinner. Charity suffereth long and is kind. I wonder if you're kind. You say you're a Christian, but are you kind? Do you stay aggravated and angry all the time? That ain't Christian. Charity envieth not. Charity is not boastful of its own self, is not vainglorious, vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, is not haughty. God and his love doth not behave himself unseemly. God's love seeketh not her own. He didn't say, well, I finally got my head dry. it was her relationship with his wet head that made her understand and describe his black bushy locks in chapter 5 to the daughters of Jerusalem. Isn't that amazing? Is not easily provoked. You know, these folks are just looking for a fight, just waiting for you to say the wrong thing. I've been thrown out of churches, and I've had people leave this church because they were just looking for somebody to say the wrong thing. Justify themselves for a word that they misinterpreted. It wasn't what really was said. They're just looking for a way out and want to justify themselves. Listen, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil. Well, I'll tell you one thing. If I ever find her outside that door again, and his mind's running hot, and he's planning what he's going to do to her and how he's going to fix her wagon, that ain't God. Thinketh no, never has thought evil. He says to the wicked, why would you not turn? I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. That's God. Isn't that amazing? But we're all mad, puffed up like an old bullfrog. I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. Don't make it too big a piece. You may not have none left. Luke chapter 6. That verse, while you're turning there, verse 7 of 1 Corinthians 13, beareth all things. Christ bore all things at that cross. Believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. God is hoping great things about you because he is your beloved. And he is going to endure until you come back to a knowledge of the spiritual revelation of God. What happened to your first love? Don't you want to get it back? Luke chapter 6, be careful, thou hast lost thy first love, lest I come and remove thy candlestick. God will unchurch you, sir or ma'am, if you don't watch out. Luke 6:31. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. So you're showing God how you want men to treat you by the way you treat them. And if you just love them which love you, what reward have you? What thank have you? For sinners love those that love them. The most wicked and ungodly people on earth love their kids. They love their families. And if ye do good to them which do good to you, you ain't done nothing. What thank have you? For sinners also do even the same. If ye lend to them of whom ye hope to receive, you ain't nothing but a banker, charging interest. What thank have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners to receive as much again. Now listen to verse 35. It's going to change. But, term of contradiction, love your enemies and do good, lend, hoping for nothing again. Now you're going to have a hard time with that, sir. You loaned him your favorite tool, you loaned him your favorite mule, you loaned him your favorite whatever, and you ain't seen it since, and probably you ain't never going to get it back. And what is it doing? Eating you alive. That ain't like God. Turn it loose. What difference does it make? But love your enemies and do good and lend, hoping for nothing again, and your reward shall be great. Not only reward, but listen, this is the only way you can prove and know that ye are the children of the highest. And listen at the next four words, for he is kind. Isn't that what 1 Corinthians 13:4 said? Charity is kind. Open to me, my beloved, my sister, my spouse. She leaves him locked out. We don't hear anything of him except through her loss. And the first words in the recorded pages of God that he speaks to her is, "Thou art beautiful, O my beloved." There awaits for you a royal robe, a golden ring, and a fatted calf feast this morning, O wandering lily. Why would you not come back and recover the sensitivity of glory that you had with God? Dear soul, I've been trying to tell you, and I don't know whether you believe me or not, but I hate religion. It has lied to me, used me, chewed me up, spit me out, abused me more than any other thing in the world. But I love the Lord and his people. Well, I ain't going over there, them people don't treat me. They didn't die on the cross for you, sir. You need to look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. You may be discouraged. You may have good reason. But love is not reasonable. It ain't. If it was, God wouldn't love me. While I was yet an enemy. That's what it said. I was an enemy. I was opposed to everything God is and did. I was as good as Satan in opposition to God. Christ died for the ungodly. Isn't that amazing? Oh, love that would not let me go. Why do you love the Lord? Because he first loved you. Ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Get over it. Everybody gets hurt. Get over it. Everybody gets rejected by somebody. There was an old sing-songy song way back yonder that said, "Everybody is somebody's fool." I said, that's the truth. And the brother read us this morning that we're to be living sacrifices. What does that mean? We are to live the death life. And the reason you can't get over it is because you think too highly of yourself. If we take my frame, my nature, my image, and say this is what Jesus should be, we'd all go to hell. Look at the cross, dear soul. The first Adam said, "She did it," pointed to his bride. Jesus knew that we did it, but he didn't rat us out. He didn't go to God and say, "I don't want to die for them," like the first Adam did. He bowed his head and freely gave up the ghost. Are there really that many Christians on earth anymore? Well, according to their testimony, I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about the way they act. In the book of Malachi, chapter 4, in verse 6. Go to Matthew 1:1 and turn back one page. Would you read me the last phrase in Malachi 4:6? The last words before that are, the children of their fathers, comma, and then you start reading the rest of the verse.
Lest I come and smite the earth with a curse.
What's the last word in the Old Testament? How many years was it, in hundreds of years, before Christ and God spoke to the earth again? How many hundreds of years was it? Thank you, you did good. 400 years. Anybody in here 100 years old? I didn't ask you how you felt. I said, oh, let me show you your birth certificate. Do you know who was in your family 400 years ago? That's a long time. That's the point I'm trying to make. The last word we heard him say was, "Open to me, my sister." And then the next word was, "Thou art beautiful." The last word in the Old Testament economy was curse. Look at Luke 1:13. Luke chapter 1. And would you read me 3 words when I stop and tell me what are the first recorded words in the New Testament after 400 years of silence when the last word was curse? You get 3 words. Luke 1:13. And the angel said unto him,
Fear not, Zacharias.
Almighty God, Almighty, no might withheld, do anything he wants, anytime he wants, to anybody he wants, for any reason he wants. The last thing he said to you was curse. 400 years he didn't speak to you. Total indifference. And since love is kind, the first words recorded in the New Testament were, fear not what? Personal, wasn't it? You're not dealing with Calvinism versus whatever that other thing is. You're not dealing with an accumulation of theology. You're dealing with the essence of eternal love. You can't approach this with reason and logic. It don't make sense. That's the reason you're having such a struggle with how can God love me so, or does God love me, is because you're trying to approach it with your noodle. You can only make God swoon and overcome him by the eye of faith. Turn your eye away. With one of your eyes, you ravish me, my sister. You've got to approach him by faith. Through faith we understand. Without faith it is impossible to please God. This is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. And twice, 2 men, Jacob and Moses, both overcame God by their faith. And God tells you in his word, that's the one army that I can't defeat. The weapons of your warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God. And you don't want to use them? The whole church has gotten us off into the dead letter of theology. I'm just a little penny candle blowing in the wind, trying to get you back to the reality of the love of God. Well, it's hard for me to believe God loves. It's not a matter of your believing it, it's a matter of your receiving it. To many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. I wonder what happened to you and your beloved, whether it be earthly spouse or earthly lover or whatever it is. Got used to each other, didn't you? Used to your heart go pitter-pat every time you smelled her scent before she came into the room. Used to you could hear his voice and you get all flustered. But now, you're mad at him because he won't take out the garbage. What happened to it? Got used to each other. Gravitated from the glory of love. And by the way, lust is not love. The world said, well, we got a divorce. Why? Because we don't love each other anymore. Well, then you never did. We fell out of love. No, you fell out of lust. You got used to one another. Now you're going to go try to get somebody else who just left somebody else because she don't have no desire for him no more. And you just go, the world just goes from one person to another like dogs, trying to cultivate an emotional feeling of sensuality. That ain't love. God is love, but all loves ain't God. But the thing that's the problem, that's just the root of the problem. I mean, that right there, excuse me, that's just the fruit of the problem. That's just out there, evidence out there on the limb. Get down to the root of the problem. What about your love for God? Did he change? If there is a coldness in our relationship with God, he didn't do it. For I am the Lord and I change not. Therefore you sons of Jacob are not consumed. He said, I love you with an everlasting love. Dear soul, today we need to find our individual prayer closets. And we need to get our souls down on their knees, on its knees. And we need to cry out to God, O love that will not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I want to give you back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths of love it may richer and fuller be.